One foolish politician can spell devastation for the entire world, and currently we are all witnessing this. On 2nd April 2025, Donald Trump announced his presidential tariffs. He imposed tariffs on more than 90 countries, and in his typical dramatic way he said, "No more."
Many countries have. They've ripped us off left and right.
In his opinion, the rest of the world have been looting America for a long time. America, the richest country in the world, was being ripped off by the rest of the world.
But now it's our turn to do the ripping.
Once he announced this, share markets all over the world crashed. Within a week, 10 to 11 trillions of dollars were lost, and the world is in danger of a global recession.
The world teeters on the edge of a potential global recession.
How strange and childish way things have been handled here can be understood from this example. On 2nd April, when Donald Trump imposed 34% tariff on China, in response China also imposed 34% tariffs on America. Trump did not like this, so he told China to withdraw their newly imposed tariffs, and if don't he will impose another 50%. But China didn't care about it and stayed adamant on its stance. And on 9th April Trump imposes another 50% tariff on China. In response China did the same, and two countries are engaged in a game of tit for tat. This trade war is now not hidden from no one. But the question is, how did we come up to this position in the first place? Let's begin with the basics. What is a tariff? A tariff is a type of tax which is imposed on goods imported from abroad. For example, if someone in the United States buys a car made in Japan, then the US government might impose a 2.5% import tax on that vehicle. This import tax is a type of tariff. Similarly, certain types of clothing imported into the US might face import duties, which are also tariffs. There are mainly two reasons behind imposing tariffs. First, to boost the government's revenue like every other taxes and becoming a source of income for the US government. And the second reason is to protect local industries. By imposing tariffs, goods imported from foreign countries become more expensive, the domestically produced goods remain comparatively cheaper. So people are incentivized to buy more of the domestic products. That's how local industries get an advantage. Many countries impose tariffs because of this. In fact, if tariffs are imposed smartly, then it helps the country's economy. For example, take South Korea. There during the 1980s and 1990s the farmers were facing a lot of difficulties. The farmers didn't have access to modern technology, so the prices at which they could sell their rice in their country was much higher than the cost of imported rice from America, Thailand and Vietnam. So to protect the livelihoods of South Korean farmers, South Korea imposed tariffs strategically. They imposed a limit. If the import of rice exceeded that limit, it'd be subjected to high tariffs, as high as 500% or more. The imported rice became more expensive and South Korean farmers could get the opportunity to remain competitive. Gradually they began using modern technology, and also with the help of the government spending on rural infrastructure and education, things become better. A few decades later, when the efficiency of these farmers were at a global level, they gradually removed the tariffs. Now think about it, if there had not been any tariffs here, how would it have impacted these farmers? The local farming sector would have been destroyed, and there would have been large-scale poverty and unemployment and so on. This proves that tariffs are not a negative step in itself. So now the question is, how are the tariffs imposed and on which things, on which countries? Because think about from a different perspective. From the perspective of the country which exports their goods to another country. As an example, take Canada. They exports a large amount of lumber to the United States. So much so that the US becomes the largest consumer of Canadian lumber. And one day, suddenly the United States imposes a 20% tariff on the lumber imported from them so that it can protect its domestic lumber industry. How would Canada feel in this situation? Canada wouldn't be happy about this, especially if the US, who is the biggest buyer of their lumber. Because Canada's lumber industry could face difficulties if their sales to the US decrease significantly. This is why when a country imposes tariffs to protect its local industry, it can be damaging to other countries. There are many cases where the exporting country doesn't like it, so it retaliates and imposes tariffs on the opposite country, and this is how a tariff war starts. A simple way to avoid this is to negotiate with the other country and explain the problem which makes it necessary for them to impose higher tariffs. If the other country sympathizes with the situation, both countries might come up with a mutually beneficial agreement. They might agree to have tariffs imposed on their exports, but they can negotiate a limit, so that they can still sell a large chunk of their products in other country. Friendly negotiations. That is crucial. However, Donald Trump did not consult anyone and imposed tariffs on 90 countries out of nowhere. That also with such an attitude.
We're going to have to go through a little tough love, maybe, but they all understand.
Practically saying that he'd do whatever he wants to. Obviously, many countries weren't happy about this and they started imposing retaliatory tariffs. On his part, Donald Trump said that he imposed tariffs to reduce America's trade deficit. That's why on the day he imposed tariffs he named it the Liberation Day. Now, those who don't know what is trade deficit, let me explain. Imagine that the total goods exported by America to China is worth $10 billion and the total goods exported by China to America is worth $20 billion. So here, expenses minus revenue and America's trade deficit come at $10 billion. The difference between export and import. Being in a trade deficit isn't inherently wrong. It is said that trade deficit is bad because your country depends a lot on another country. But if your country's economy is strong and your country receives a large amount of foreign investments, and if you don't depend on another country for something critical, in that cases, being in a trade deficit won't be bad. But Trump thinks that America's trade deficit is detrimental. And to get out of this trade deficit he claims to have imposed these tariffs. And to impose these tariffs he went as far as to use the emergency powers.
They're a national emergency that threatens our security and our very way of life.
He declared being in a trade deficit to be a national emergency. Can you imagine how deep the ship has sunk? Experts say that misusing the Emergency Act like this isn't right for the democracy. Now let's take a closer look at the tariffs imposed by Trump. At that day, Donald Trump stood there with a big board that had the tariffs for different countries. Every foreign good imported into America got at least a 10% tariff. This 10% tariff has also been imposed on those countries with whom America isn't even in a trade deficit. Trump even used the excuse that because some countries imposed tariffs on goods exported by America, the tariffs imposed by Trump should actually be considered reciprocal tariffs.
Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them.
Look at the list here. 49% on Cambodia, 46% on Vietnam, 20% tariff on the European Union, 32% on Taiwan, 25% on South Korea and 17% on Israel. After the tit-for-tat game with China, the final tariffs on China have reached over 125%. It's interesting to see how these exact numbers were calculated. A simple formula was used here. They took the trade deficit of any country with America and divided it by the imports coming from that country. And half of the resulting percentage became the new tariff to be imposed on that country by Trump. For example, America has a trade deficit of $295 billion with China and the American goods imported by China are worth $439.9 billion. According to the formula, the percentage here is 67%. The trade deficit between the two countries is 67%. But here Trump said something stupid. Trump said that this 67% is the rate of tariff which China imposes on American goods, which is not true at all. He claimed this was the Chinese tariff and imposed a tariff of half of it at 34%. They did this to every country. I don't understand how no one around Trump noticed this or he misspoke. This formula can be understood by primary school kids too, but no, Trump crossed all the limits of stupidity when he imposed tariffs on some uninhabited islands near Antarctica. No humans live there. No human has even gone there in the last 10 years, there are only penguins on that island. But now Trump imposed a 10% tariff on these islands as well. Seriously, these islands are so isolated that you'd need to take 2-week-long boat journey from Australia, and no human has undertaken this journey in the last 10 years. Could it be that when Trump saw that this island was called McDonald Island he considered it to be some sort of McDonald's Disneyland? America is a huge consumer market. Small and big businesses all over the world depend on selling their products to American consumers. That's why many countries imposed retaliatory tariffs to fight against America. China, the European Union, and Canada deliberately targeted those places in retaliation from where Trump gets the most votes in America. China targeted corn farmers and car makers. Canada imposed tariffs on poultry farms and AC manufacturers. Europe imposed tariffs on steel mills and slaughterhouses. These are the sectors that have the most number of people who support and vote for Trump. Their logic is simple. If they want to make a real impact, they need to affect those people who voted for this stupid politician. Actually imposing such tariffs on so many countries all of a sudden without talking to them, will definitely cause harm and both sides will suffer. The country from where you import goods, the businesses of that country would be affected. People will buy fewer goods. But in your own country, when foreign goods get expensive, and not just a few things, but almost everything gets more expensive, the brunt of it all will be borne by the common man's pockets. Trump's tariffs would affect Americans the worst. Because today we live in a globalized world. The goods sold in America in most cases either made abroad entirely, or its small components, raw materials or ingredients are imported from abroad. Take Mr. Beast's example. He tweeted that although it is made in America, but the cacao beans used in the chocolate are imported, mostly from African countries. With the increase in tariffs, it'd be more expensive to import the raw materials, and it will make the chocolates more expensive. That's why he tweeted that after these tariffs, it would actually be cheaper to make these chocolates outside the US. If we look at history, every time America has imposed tariffs like this without thinking it through, America was the one to suffer the losses. In 1789, the first American president George Washington brought the Tariff Act, as per which there was a 5% tax on imported goods. But in 1890, tariffs were increased at a large scale. More than 1,500 goods were taxed at 49.5%. William McKinley was responsible for these increased tariffs, who is also known as Napoleon of protectionism. Trump considers him a hero.
I'm a fan of William McKinley. William McKinley. William McKinley. William McKinley. William McKinley. President McKinley.
But do you know what happened because of these tariffs? In 1893 there was a depression in America, unemployment reached 25%. After 1910 the Democrats came into power. They supported free trade and lowered the tariffs. There was rapid economic growth in America. But in 1920 the Republican Party came into power again, and to protect the farmers and industries, tariffs were raised once again. Then in 1930 Republican President Herbert brought the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. Under this, in about every sector the tariffs were increased by 20% or more. What happened after this? The other countries weren't happy with this and started retaliation. They imposed retaliatory tariffs, and after that, worldwide international trade declined. Between 1929 and 1934 global trade decreased by 66%. In 1929 there was the Great Depression. Though it was caused due to other reasons, but it doesn't change the fact that the situation only worsened, and for that the blame lies with these tariffs. For about 10 years the American and global economies remained stuck. It was only in 1939, once the Second World War began, the factory production picked up in America, and America finally come out of this depression. Since the Second World War America has always encouraged free trade. It has always told other countries to keep their tariffs as low as possible. The lower the tariffs, the more international trade there will be, and every country stands to benefit from this. Based on this philosophy the WTO, or the World Trade Organization, was formed. It became a platform for negotiation for the whole world. Even now if you go to the WTO's Wikipedia page, you will see a purpose section where it says, Reduction of Tariffs and Other Barriers to Trade. The WTO was formed with the aim to reduce tariffs all over the world. In the establishment and promotion of this international organization America played a leading role. But now after Donald Trump's presidency everything has turned upside down. Other countries aren't sure how much they can trust America. What does America actually believe in? In fact, the Prime Minister of Singapore gave an interesting statement about this. He states that the last time there was a trade war on such a large scale, it caused armed conflicts which eventually resulted in the Second World War. It's getting more and more difficult to predict what will happen next. The global economy is going through quite an unpredictable time, and Donald Trump's behavior is responsible for this unpredictability. On the night of 9th April the news broke that Trump has paused tariffs on all countries for 90 days, and has reduced them to only 10% except for China. In fact, tariffs on China have been increased further. The rates of tariffs are fluctuating each day and people are confused. What is Trump trying to do? Perhaps even Trump won't know the right answer to this. Because perhaps he doesn't know what he wants to do. Some people have made accusations of stock market manipulation too. When he suddenly imposed tariffs the stock market fell. But the day the tariffs were removed, that morning before the tariffs were lifted, he tweeted this. He knew that as soon as the tariffs would be lifted the stock market would go up again. The post was meant to tell his followers, go and buy stocks. As soon as he announced the pause of the tariffs the stock market suddenly shot up. This is a straightforward and clear proof of stock market manipulation. But the question arises, who will dare to investigate the American president? And even after investigating, the question is there a judge in America who will dare to pass a judgment against Donald Trump? I highly doubt that. Another theory is that Donald Trump took this huge U-turn because he hadn't expected the world will react this way towards his tariffs. If so, this shows his incompetencies. And if not, something must be missing. As an example, some allege that this was Trump's actual plan. He was playing 4D chess by first imposing such high tariffs globally, so that the value of the dollar gets decreases. After all, a weaker dollar makes American-made goods and services cheaper for other countries. This could lead to increased demand for U.S. exports, potentially boosting American manufacturing and creating jobs. But sudden sharp and uncontrolled loss of value can lead to significant economic instability and hardship. Like, all the imports goods will cost more, inflation will be higher and repaying debt will be expensive. Not to mention, dollar's reserve currency statues will be gone. After all, one of the reason other country chose dollar as reserve currency is because of its high value. In other words, American economy and its citizens' global influence will be challenged. This too shows Trump's short-sightedness. If this happen, full country will be in trouble. Imposing and removing tariffs like this on such a large scale is not a game. This affects millions of small and big businesses all over the world. Millions of businesses who cannot price their goods properly because they don't know what will be the tariffs in future and how would these taxes affect their profits. Will they remain profitable or not? Personally, I believe he is not as dumb as we think he is. After all, he didn't come this far because he is an idiot. Most Americans still love and respect him because of his honesty and give him the title Honest Lion of America.
He's what I call an honest lion.
He also has good humor.
Jump.
Between a wet raccoon and Donald J. Trump's hair. You're not a Kamala person. You're a Khabib person. I brought my Bible, and this was written by my mother.
Not to mention, we all remember the day when he nearly got shot and still stood up. It was bone-chilling. I never saw something like this in my entire life. Donald Trump, if you are watching, I know that you love your country and all of this is to make your country more powerful and stable. But the path you have chosen is not the right match for that goal. Only an idiot would do it. It's not just hurting others but also Americans as well, the people you stand for. The real problem is that we are losing our most trustworthy allies because of this, and it's not right for the long term. After all, no one can do everything themselves.
I feel having the Democrats in with us is absolutely vital.
As human beings, we need each other's help to grow together. I know you always respect wise and hardworking people, and it doesn't matter who is your friend and who is your enemy. So please stop it and talk to other countries to find a solution to this mess. If you all like this informative video, then share it with other family members and friends, to the point he will notice it and finally will understand, as a general person, what we really think about him and his tariffs. It's possible that I made a mistake while creating this informative video for you. So if any of you notice a mistake, please write it in the comments to warn others. And also subscribe if you want to know his childish behavior against Zelensky in the Trump and Zelensky meeting. How such stupid behavior affected things internationally. Until then, God bless you.
You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. You through this stupid president. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over